after that, you couldn't go swimming. If you did, you took a bucket of turpentine or something to wash the tar off.
Oh,
Wow, that's interesting, yeah. Go ahead.
I'm his wife, we worked together then, but I can remember us coming to the beach, walking and getting tar on, that's how old I am. Walking and getting the tar on us, and Mama having a pan with turpentine or something before we got in the car and try to get it off of us.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, I can remember that.
Everybody at the beach had to paint the top of their headlights black.
Yeah.
No car could project the light out.
Well, one interesting thought, you're right, and all the blackouts, the first blackout on the East Coast of the United States is April 11th. Governor Spencer Holland institutes a blackout in Florida. So Florida is the first state to have a blackout, and it's because of this event.
well, I also moved into 516 Puerto Rico Boulevard with my family in 1938. I was 4 years old. I'm still living there. One thing you got to realize is that was one of the first 12 houses in Puerto Rico.
Wow.
Puerto Rico Boulevard was A1A.
Right.
There were no north-south roads or nothing west of Puerto Rico Boulevard.
Yeah.
The houses were built on sand dunes from the old mining operation. And I would say in 42, there were probably 24 houses in Puerto Rico.
Wow.
And Guana started at 516 Puerto Rico Boulevard. It was, in other words, there was no land to build on at that point. That's about, well, it's really just over here from. So you got to realize that Puerto Rico was just a beach community. 3 of the people that bought those first 12 houses planned to live year-round here.
Wow.
Because the power wasn't on all the time. We had an ice box. They delivered 50 pounds of ice. And I remember the blackout curtains and the shields over the headlights. And all the adult men had to have an ID card. There were 3 ways to get to this island, if you want to call it that. There was Atlantic Boulevard, there was 210, and there was Alano Beach.
Yeah.
There was no Beach Boulevard.
Yeah, one of the stories is that Eddie Musel, say it again? Musalem. Eddie Musalem comes over the 210 bridge that night with a guy who had been a bootlegger to see it. But you reminded me of something. Jennifer's in the back, and if you would like to be invited to anything else we do, or would like to know when my book comes out called The Night the Nazis Attacked Jacksonville Beach. It's a good one. We can tell you. But you guys in particular, if we could get all 3 of your names, I'd like to talk to you some more since you were here when it happened. We're trying to accumulate as much as we can. Go ahead.
Can you tell us about the Nazis that were captured, that were killed?
The saboteurs?
Yeah.
Sure. 2 months after this attack, there's an event that's somewhat better known, and essentially 8 saboteurs come ashore in the United States. The first 4 land near Montauk Point in Long Island, and the second 4 land in Ponte Vedra. The 4 that land in Montauk are confronted by a Coast Guardsman named Cullen. I think his first name's Tom, but I know his last name is Cullen. And they attempt to bribe him. And it's unclear how that goes, and it's unclear if the guys in the northern group had decided before then, but certainly after then, 2 of them decided they were going to turn themselves in. And so the 4 guys that land here in Ponte Vedra, actually down further south, they come ashore and they catch the bus at Alice Landrum's post office and general store. They go into Jacksonville. They spend the night at the Washington Hotel. And is there a Roosevelt Hotel in that thing? Yeah, I think 2 of them are at the Washington, 2 of them at the Roosevelt, and then they go north. And that group that lands here includes 1 U.S. citizen. Most of these guys it's unclear how much they really wanted to come here and do anything else. But in any event, 2 of the guys in the northern group, one of whom is a guy named George Dash, they turn themselves into the FBI. and they're in a hotel in New York, and they call the FBI office in New York, and they say, we'd like to turn ourselves in, we're German spies, and the FBI hangs up on them. So one Dash leaves his friend, I think, in New York, and he travels to Washington. He stays at the Mayflower Hotel. And he again calls the FBI in Washington. He says, I'm a German spy, I'd like to surrender. And they hang up on him. And so eventually, he's at the Mayflower Hotel, which is famous for prostitution scandal years later, the Mayflower Madam. But in any event, he's at the Mayflower Hotel. There's two versions of the story. In one version, the FBI agents come to get him. In the other version, he actually travels to the FBI offices, and I think that's what actually happened. But again, they don't take him seriously until he dumps over $80,000 in cash onto the desk. And then they begin to think, well, maybe he is a spy. And using his information, they collect the other 6. They arrest them all. The last guy they get is one of the 4 that lands here, and he's 22 years old. The name will come to me in a second. And he's an American citizen, and he's taken his part of the spy money, and he bought an engagement ring for his fiancée and a car. So, just what every 22-year-old does with money, right? And he gets arrested when he goes into the FBI office to register for the draft. And he probably would have fought in the war here. His fiancée ends up testifying in his defense. Hoover doesn't really want anybody to know that they surrendered. He wants it to appear that the FBI, the G-men, have caught these people. So they kind of leave out the whole thing about Dash surrendering. FDR, for his own purposes, wants his own spectacle. Much like Hartigan wanted his spectacle off Jack's Beach, April 10, 1942, FDR wants his spectacle, and he wants these guys executed. Under civilian law, the worst they can get them for is conspiracy to commit treason, which would carry 6 months to 2 years. It's not enough for FDR. So he organizes a military tribunal with 8 generals, and over a 2 or 3 day trial in secret, all 8 are sentenced to die. FDR then commutes the sentence of 2 of them, the guy that surrendered and his partner, to life and 30 years. And on August 8, 1942, less than 2 months after they landed, the remaining 6 are executed on the 3rd floor of the Washington City Jail in a electric chair that was designed by Thomas Edison. And it was on the 3rd floor of the Washington City Jail.
Where is that?
Where is it? Where's the city jail? I'm not sure.
Washington?
In Washington, D.C. They turned off the lights at the jail so that when they flipped the switch on the electric chair, the lights wouldn't flash. It took 7 minutes on average to kill each one. That particular electric chair was not particularly well built. It was not one of Thomas Edison's greatest inventions. They called it Old Smoky, and it had been in Trenton State Prison. That's where it came from. Go ahead.
Edison was the one that liked direct current as
Yes.
opposed to alternate.
Yeah.
Tesla liked alternating current, and I don't know a lot about electric chairs, but I think alternating current works better in electric chairs.
Are merchant seamen, are they fair game in this? It seems to me sinking the boats is one thing, but it seems like he hung around to kill the rest of the merchant.
It's funny. They never actually attacked the merchant mariners, but we know that when they would shell the sinking ship, that a lot more guys would die. That's why I pointed out in that first 2 sinkings, the Oklahoma, 19 guys, the S.O. Baton Rouge, only 2. And that's because the S.O. Baton Rouge didn't get shelled. There are no provable instances of Germans actually targeting mariners in the water. Like trying to machine gun them in the lifeboats. Those stories persisted throughout the war, but there's no indication it ever happened. When Hardigan comes here in 1990, and in the 2 trips he comes here, he gets something of a hero's welcome. Philip May said it was the greatest guy he ever met in his life, something like that. We got to get that quote right. But he's one of the guys that sees him is a guy named Robert E. Lee Watson. And Robert E. Lee Watson had lied about how old he was to get into the Navy at 17, and he was one of the guys on the Gulf of America that night. He was one of the guys operating the deck gun. And when Cardigan says, you know, we were shelling the ship to sink it, he basically reacts somewhat violently and says, you know, they were trying to kill us. So that was his perception. Probably would have been yours and mine if we'd been on the ship, right? And he starts firing that deck gun. He's trying to kill us. I want to hear later with something else. Go ahead.
Who invited Hardigan to come here?
He was invited by a man named Michael Gannon, Father Michael from the University of Florida. He was a historian, and he wrote a book called Operation Drumbeat about the entire campaign, but largely about the exploits of Reinhard Hardigan. And Hardigan comes for 2 book tours with Michael Gannon. Gannon died about a year ago. And Jennifer keeps liking to tell people that, oh, she's not here, that I'm the last surviving expert now. Somebody wants to be an expert. You know, my wife will tell you that you have no idea what's going to attract my attention, right? You never know what I'm going to get obsessed about, right? I wrote the first Gulf of America article back in 2010. I can tell you that I've been interested in it at least since that time, probably before. Part of it was that I read a variety of different stories. You ever go over to the Indian Club, anybody, and seen the models? So there's a model of the U-123 and a model of the SS Gulf of America. And they're neat models. But underneath there's a plaque that tells the story. But I got to tell you, the plaque's entirely wrong. It's just not even right. You're not even close to right. It represents a pre-1990 understanding of what happened. So that's part of it. Is I read different stories and I wondered, well, what really happened? This is my son, by the way. When it comes to his hand up. Go ahead. What's your question, Alexander? It better be a good one.
Nothing.
No, do you have a question?
No.
No? You just want me to introduce you?
No, I wanted to come up, but...
Okay, come on. Let's be quiet. Anybody else? Oh, go ahead.
Did anybody propose a reason for the delta, the time difference between the calculated impact and the impact?
I think he was just moving away. They didn't make the right calculations because they're coming at a really oblique angle. And the submarine, the actual U.S. submariners that I talked to about this, indicate that this is just an impossible shot. You know, because the ship's moving away from you, so you got to lead it, and you're coming from behind, so you don't have all the kind of advantages of coming at an angle. And that's just the theory, that they made a mistake.
Did the U-boat carry the Enigma machine?
Yes and no. The yes is they carried a machine very similar to the Enigma. The Enigma machine that Alan Turing breaks has 4 wheels. The German naval Enigma machine had 5. So it was actually more difficult to break. By the time Hardigan gets here, we have broken the English have broken the German naval code. And they're hopping mad that all these ships are getting torpedoed off our coastline because they keep telling us, not exactly, but with, you know, relatively where all these submarines are, and we're not handling them well. Somebody asked about the Gannon book. Gannon is very critical of Admiral King. The Navy was not happy with that criticism, and their historians kind of fired back. And their response was 600,000+ U.S. troops went from essentially New York and Boston to England during that period, and we didn't lose a single one. At the same time, we're building up to fight this war in the Pacific. We just didn't have the ships. We made a conscious effort to allow the East Coast to be attacked.
I looked up on Google the ship,
Yes.
and it's in 60 miles deep water out there, and it's a reef.
Yes.
And it's got a video where they, you know, go and look at it
Right.
as it is now. It's a reef.
Yes. Yeah, you can see video. I don't know why we didn't have that video, but the Gulf of America is still out there. For years, she was marked by a nun's buoy because she was considered a hazard to navigation. She's collapsed on herself. She's just a reef now. A fish haven and diving destination.
What happened to the two guys that went to prison? Did they die in prison?
Oh, great question. Sorry. That's good. Thank you. No, they don't. In 1948, President Truman pardons them both and they go back to Germany. And for the rest of his life, the people in Germany weren't that happy with Dash when he gets there because he had turned them all in.